You're watching The Mic Check on every Monday afternoon at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern.
Hello and welcome everybody to this week's Mic Check. I know this was supposed to be Nathan talking this week, but unfortunately he's got a little bit of a bug. He is here with us, so everybody go ahead and wave hi to him if you want to, but he's not going to be participating right now. So we're going to miss out on a lot of the fun that he usually brings, which is unfortunate, but thankfully he's doing okay. His wife's doing okay, which is awesome. Fantastic. Really glad to hear that. And he provided us with a really fun script today. It's kind of short, but it has a lot of storytelling in it, which I'm really, really excited about. What I'm also really excited about is that we have a new person who is volunteering to go first. Joshua.
Yay!
Whenever you're ready, give us our first read.
Okay. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told the story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
All right, so you get to choose who goes after you. Who's going next?
Eeny, meeny, miny, Frank Sticky. Sticky. Sorry.
Frank.
You know, I'm going to have to call you Sticky now just because of that. Right.
Everybody did when I was growing up.
I was saying Stecky, but with a New Zealand accent. That's
I'll be back. I'm going to go on my laptop.
No worries.
All righty. So, yeah, no, Sticky Stecky, that was me. So, all right, here we go. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told stories with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. Where do we go next? Let's go to, well, Donna said she wanted to read earlier. She was putting her hand up. So, Donna, how about you?
Great, thank you. All right. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incas told story with dancers and fire. Aborigines told it with stars and spears. Stories are the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of each sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal.
All right. You get to choose who goes next.
Donna, you get to choose who goes next.
Sorry about that. How about Janet?
Okay.
Did I just say? Okay, never mind. All righty. Sorry. I think I said something out loud and I didn't realize I did that. Okay. Wait, do I say a story? No. No, right? You guys?
No, just start from every moment.
All right. Okay. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. I wasn't listening earlier. Is it Incans and Aborigines?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal. Devon.
Okay. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. Stories take and make. That's grammatically incorrect. Sorry, it threw me. Isn't it?
That's
Okay,
okay. We'll get into
stories
that
take-
in the discussion section.
Sorry, it's good to cold read. Okay, stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal.
There you go.
And Stan.
All right. I had to
She even
work-
pointed at you, Dan.
Yeah, I'm right next.
Hi, Janet.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose this chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. Let's see, Michael, Crystal, Xavier, and John hasn't gone yet, correct?
That is correct.
John.
Thank you, Dan. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told stories with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. How about, who hasn't read yet? Dan, you haven't read yet.
I read right before you did.
Yeah, he chose you.
He chose you.
It was Michael, Crystal, and Xavier haven't gone yet.
In my own defense, I've been up since 4 o'clock and it's been a really hard day. Michael, do me a favor and just cut that part out. How about, you know what? I've never heard Crystal read before. How about Crystal's next?
You can hear me?
I can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can.
Listen me good. Okay. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose chisel instead. The icons told stories with dance and fire. The Aborigines, I know I butchered that one, told it with the star and spear. Stories that are very essence to the human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion and silence, and every heart. Stones take the fleeting temporal, which make them eternal.
All right. So it's myself, Xavier, and didn't we have somebody just join? Yeah, Gary.
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Hello. Welcome to the mic check.
Thank you very much.
So,
Hey, Josh.
So, Crystal, you can choose one of the three of us to read next.
Michael,
Okay.
only because I adore that name.
Well, thank you. My mom gave it to me. All right. Gary, did you have the? Were you given the script? Do you have a link for it? I think we need to post
I
for it.
just got the link. It's
Okay.
all I see is one page though. A
Yeah,
couple
yeah.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah, it's just a couple of lines. It's real short.
Perfect. Yep, I got it.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
All right, so it's my turn to read now. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told stories with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal. All right. Xavier, you ready to go?
Sure. Can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal.
Thank you very much. And that leaves Gary as last but not least.
Not least. All right. Thank
So
you.
go ahead and give us a read.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told stories with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
All right. So that means everybody has read. Awesome. So now that we've done our cold reads, now we move on to the discussion portion of the mic check. So this is an opportunity for us to go ahead and talk about the script itself, talk about things we may have noticed in other people's reads about the script, and then we're going to go ahead and go through and see if we can come to an agreement on how the script should be read, which will lead us into our directed sessions. So what were some commonalities that you may have noticed in these reads? So for those who heard most of them, this is open to anybody. So anybody can go ahead and pop in and let us know what you think. What were some common things that you heard throughout the reads?
A lot of words were added, missing, or changed in almost
Okay.
everybody's read. They multiplied, told story to stories. They stars and spears, and a lot of them also missed at stories are at the very essence of human life. That's just the biggest thing that I noticed is almost everybody did it.
Okay.
Probably
I
including
thought,
myself.
I thought a lot of the reads were really well done. I like, especially liked Mike's. I liked Frank's. I liked Xavier's. I mean, I liked them all, but I noticed
Oh, Russ
that they
showed up.
were, good reads for them.
Okay. Hey, Russ, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Hey, you caught us just at the perfect time. Would you mind reading for us? I know it's going to be completely cold, but that's the point.
Well, I haven't even.
I just
downloaded it
popped
yet.
it into chat.
Are you okay with that? You don't have to if you don't want to. That's fine.
Sure, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Okay.
You just click it and wait for it to come up, though. My computer.
Michael,
comes
while
up.
he's waiting for that to load, is this Carl Sagan?
I don't know. It may be. This one was actually provided by Nathan this week. But yeah,
I submitted this for review a couple of years ago on a certain website.
which we will not name.
Yeah.
This definitely, this very much so seems very Carl Sagan.
Very anthemic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, Russ, if you're ready, let's hear it.
I'm trying. I'm waiting. My computer's like slow today. Has everybody else already done it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Just make something up.
Start ad-libbing. The script is called A Story. Let's go with it.
Once upon a time.
In a bar.
In a world.
Far, far away.
Somebody had to do it in a world.
Well, come on. We're a group of voice actors here. If we don't start quoting Don LaFontaine in some way, shape, or form, what are we doing with ourselves?
Right.
Come on. In a world where every moment has a story.
Oh, that's good. That was good.
Well, I mean, I've been told once or twice I should be on the radio, so I mean, I figured I might as well give that a try, right?
You should really consider getting into voiceovers, Michael. Honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
I've
No,
never
it's a
heard that
voice-
before.
No, I
Certainly
hear
everyone's
your
for it.
voiceover every time you speak. It's like, God, that guy really should be.
Oh, man.
All right, has it popped up for you, Russ?
No, I think you have to let someone else go real quick. I'll work on it.
Oh, okay. Well, unfortunately, you're the last person, so there's nobody else to go before you. It's okay. Again, we're into the discussion phase of the mic check anyway. So we've heard quite a few different reads. We'll move on from here. Russ, you'll get you'll get the bonus of not embarrassing yourself with a cold read. How does that sound?
Okay. I'll
All right, cool.
let you know when I
You
get it.
like it.
Alrighty then. So one of the things that was pointed out already was that some of the words were changed or missing
Or added.
or added. Was there anything about techniques, the different kinds of reads that you may have heard that stuck out to you?
A lot of zone 1.
A lot of zone 1?
What's that?
So when we talk about zone reading, we're talking about the kind of intimacy that you have with a microphone. Zone 1 is very close and somewhat
Oh.
quiet. Yeah, zone 2 is a little farther away and it's more conversational.
Oh.
And zone 3 is kind of your louder read.
Oh, okay.
Go.
Was that
Yeah,
good or
it's sort of-
bad
it's sort of
zone?
a- It's
One.
sort of a generic distance to the microphone that we're talking about. So
Okay.
So
Was
zone 1 reads means that a lot of them were really close to the microphone and really more intimate reads.
Well, having said that, is that appropriate for this read, in your opinion?
Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into
Okay.
that. I just want to know what people noticed.
All right.
Mm.
Was there anything else? Any other techniques or anything like that that maybe stuck out to you guys? I noticed in some of the reads down at the very end, there was actually some of that ABC stuff used. You know, that 1, 2, 3, the dun 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 for that very last sentence, which I thought really worked out.
The one right before. Yeah. They count.
Oh yeah, second to the last sentence.
I noticed there wasn't a lot of consistency in tone all the way through. For most of the reads, it seems like there's really no reason to shift gears too much in this script. It should have maybe the same tone all the way through. And I did notice at least half of the reads seem to vary in tone from beginning to end.
I absolutely agree. Did anybody else notice that? Some of the varying tones throughout the read?
Yeah,
I definitely
Yeah.
did.
They all felt fairly consistent all the way through. I mean, it was the same intimate zone 1 tone. I mean, all the way through.
Sort of. Some of them were a little bit out there, but yeah, I think for the most part we sort of zoned in on that. Why do you think that was tended to more than either a zone 2 or a zone 3 read?
That first sentence.
Hmm.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters.
It screams it.
Yeah, it screams zone 1 right there. Just that first sentence. It may be. I mean, you could probably take that back to a zone 2, but and actually, I think it probably should be read in zone 2.
It's a very intimate message. It's a very personal message.
It's not every moment has a story.
No, it's
not so.
I mean, it could be, but that would be really weird.
Every moment has a story.
Soccer game.
And every,
Well, here's the real question. Looking at the script, what do you think its use is? Like, where do you think it's going to be used?
I think it's an introduction.
Documentary.
Yeah, like a narrative on a video.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's a narrative on a video, if it's more of that introduction, that setting, that setting the tone for the rest of the script and the rest of the read, where do you think we should place our tone? Where would be the most appropriate? So if we can agree that this is a documentary opening, because it definitely sounds like it, very Carl Sagan-esque, what kind of read should we have going into it?
Perhaps lightly, not real loud.
Mm-hmm. So definitely that zone 1 sort of read?
I think. I don't. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. Does anybody disagree?
Low and pensive.
Low and pensive? Okay.
Instructional.
Instructional.
Yeah.
Instructional.
Not like an e-learning instructional, but more like a conversational instructional. Like you're telling a guy about, you're talking to somebody about something in history.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe instructional, conversational to me. I mean, I probably completely different than everybody else, though.
The purpose of it is to have people want to hear more. You're inviting them to kind of stick around and see what's next. But again, with the wording, I have to agree with Dan. It is a more intimate feel, so it's an interesting mix.
So it's sort of that zone 1 intimacy, but with more of the instructional feel.
Really, I think more of a cinematic feel. Or
wonder.
Yeah, cinematic.
And very internal in terms of emotional involvement. The e-learning thing gets kind of like, it's here, I'm showing you something that's going on over there. But whereas the emotion has to kind of be inside, underneath the subtext. Gotta have some real strong subtext going on with this script. It can't just be, oh, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah, Nathan very much so agrees with you there too. He just posted that in the chat. And I definitely agree with that as well. My interpretation of this script, what I'm seeing here, is that this is laying the groundwork for the kind of awe and wonder that you're trying to instill about the stories that are told throughout history, about your connection with people in the past, and about how they told those stories. So I would agree, awe, wonder, almost reverence, sort of a quieter, more closely, close to the microphone, intimate sort of read. I think that's going to fit this much better than sort of like, straight, direct kind of every moment has a story and every story matters. This is definitely not one of those, how would I describe it? Commercial style reads?
Yeah, it sounds very movie thematic, like you would see it as a preview. But you can also imagine like some bouncy, peppy music, tennis ball music, ping pongy, happy music behind it. Every moment has a story.
Wow.
And it lends itself to more of a comedic.
Wow.
But not this one. The continuation of the read is like,
Yeah,
I get more thematic, more dramatic.
I think I definitely agree with that. This is definitely more thematic and a more serious sort of wondrous type of read. So I would suggest taking your time with the read, giving yourself time to paint the picture and see what's going on here. Another device that's used here that tells me that this is definitely a TV script is specifically how it's written. Do you see how it's not one big block of text, but everything's sort of split apart? That is really, really common with TV or audio-visual scripts, because there's going to be some kind of imagery going on in the background, and these the way that it's written here, the line and then break and then line and then break and then line and then break, is very much so a huge indication that this is both audio and visual. So that's something to pay attention to. If this was just audio, if this was just you talking, they wouldn't take the time to go ahead and split it up like that, because I guarantee you, when this was in the writer's studio, when they were still writing this, in between those breaks was image direction. Like, this is how they wanted to see the video play out. So
Right.
like every moment has a story, pan to, B-roll shots of sunrises, sunsets, stars, things like that. The first men painted stories on stone walls, and then, it would pan to things like, ancient drawings, ancient cave drawings and old sculptures and things like that. So I guarantee you that that direction was in between each one of these lines, very much so endemic of an audio-visual script. I got to step away for just a second. I will be right back. But I want you guys to think about, if that's the case, what are some important points that we should focus on in the script?
Jeez. Let's see.
The very essence of human life is kind of the apex for me. The very
That's
essence
kind of a
human life.
turning point for me. Stories are at the very essence
Okay.
of human life. This is where you start getting into your the beginning of the show.
Right.
So I kind of see that as the turning point. I may be wrong.
That's just what I was saying. Same thing.
Yeah.
Apex right there.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you. Well, I guess that does make sense. But
It's also kind of the final wrap up too. Like they're making their final pitch in here. This is why this is all important. So there's a lot that's condensed right in that just one little bitty sentence. The very essence of human life.
So like if this was a Discovery Channel commercial,
Yeah.
that'd be
Okay.
the selling point right there. Stories are at the very essence of human life.
Okay.
Oh, do we want to move into that? We don't want to move into that.
All right, I apologize for that. Business
Okay,
never stops.
Michael's back. Everybody, everybody's.
No, I'd like to hear, what was the discussion like? What did you guys come up with? What were some important things that we need to focus on in the script?
We said you needed a haircut.
Hey,
It's that one
Is it
right
a
there.
haircut or a shave? Because I know I need a shave.
Both,
Why, do I
actually.
have that one hair that's sticking out? Let me see.
Both. I was just being
This
nice.
one right over here.
Well, these cameras are not the most complimentary, by the way. You know what I mean?
It's okay. I have a face for radio anyways, so
Don't we all? That's why we do this.
No.
great. Now you've made me all self-conscious. Thank you. Anyway, getting back to the script, let's go ahead and let's see if we can agree on certain ways to read this to sort of bring out that more reverent and cinematic read that we're going for here.
So what we were
Somebody-
discussing was stories are at the very essence of human life. Might be the turning point, the apex, the key to the entire script right here. And I
Not so much a turning point, but a crescendo.
yes.
Okay.
And I
That
said
sounds
if it
good to
was
me.
like a Discovery Channel promo script or something, that would probably be the most powerful message in the entire script.
Okay.
Or like the show, if it's like a show or something. I know it's
I
not.
totally agree. Well, I mean, I totally agree. That sounds good to me. I do think that right there, stories are at the very essence of human life. It's sort of the typifying of what we've been leading up to so far. So I think that right there would be a good one to go ahead and give it that sort of like, crescendo feel, that peak of sort of that reverence and emotion, that almost awestruck feeling. I think that really should go there. I completely agree with that. But let's talk about the first two sentences here, this first line. If we want to give it that sort of not documentary style, but that reverent and awestruck feeling, how do you think we should approach it? Are there words you think we should hit differently or pronounce differently? Are there certain emphases that we need to put in there? What are we thinking? Let's go ahead and brainstorm this a little bit. First two lines, let's introduce somebody who's listening to this incredible world of the stories that we tell.
Matters.
Okay, so should we emphasize that a little bit more, or what are you thinking?
I think you can do every.
I would go with moment.
Yeah.
The moment is has a story.
I
Okay,
would go with
okay,
moment
you're right.
and matters.
I see it.
Yeah.
Moment matters or moment story. Every moment has a story, and every story matters.
Because you're talking about moments and the facts that each moment matters. So
Right.
with moment and matters.
Well, here's the thing, though. We're talking about stories.
Stories, yeah.
Every.
So I think every moment has a story, and every story matters.
Right.
So I think story and matters are going to be the two most important ones to hit in those two sentences.
Has a story.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. So give it a little bit of break, differentiate those. We're talking about stories, so we need to stay on message here. So if every story matters, like if we just did that, if we cut everything else out, then if you put emphasis on story and matters, that's kind of the typifying point of this whole introduction script so far. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. Can we agree on that? Anybody disagree?
Yeah,
I
agree.
That's the way to say
Makes
it.
some
I
sense.
agree.
Okay. So then, let's move on to the next one. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead.
Stories again.
Stories again, yep. And then, Stonewall and Chisel might.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think the difference here. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
The first
Yeah, you're
men
making a
and then
person.
ancient Egyptians. Because you've already brought up stories, so you don't want to keep emphasizing that. You want to
Stone
emphasize
walls
what's
and-
different about each story.
Yeah, it's
Michael, when you did your read, you punched the word painted and chisel, and I think that's appropriate here.
okay.
I would dial it back a hair, but
Yeah.
you made it stand out so that it was clear that you're differentiating the points and
Yeah, because what I'm seeing here, this is just what's going on in my mind, why I chose that and why I would say that's probably a good choice, is that we've established that stories, that everything has a story and every story matters. And now we're moving into how those stories were told. So the first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. So you see how
Yeah.
it's going into how these stories are actually being told, not necessarily like the medium upon which they were being told.
Right.
This the first part is about how early on these early human beings would use simple pigments to paint pictures on walls, but that same stone was used in ancient Egypt as a bas relief to cut the stories out of. If we're still on this, the focus of how these stories are told and what these stories are being the most important part, that stuck out to me in my mind as being the most important part. We've established stories are good. Now how are they being told?
Okay, I just realized something. The whole rhythm is poetic. The
It
rhythm
is.
of the script is very poetic.
It definitely is. Good point.
I just noticed that. I was reading it to myself, and I'm like, "Whoa, hello."
Yeah, this is definitely a very storytelling kind of script. So one of the things that's really almost defines storytelling is your poetic pacing. So if you want to sound like a storyteller, you want to sound almost poetic. Those two go hand in hand. Storyteller and poetry are sort of one and the same in terms of delivery. So a lot of these scripts that are supposed to draw people in and keep them, activate those endorphins of, okay, what's happening next? Oh man, I'm really loving this. It's all poetic.
The only place that I would differ is that each set, if this is a stanza, the second line of the stanza and the third line of the stanza, obviously the whole message is encapsulated in stories are the very essence of human life. And you can go through that and there's two sets of contrast in each line. First men, stone walls, Egyptians, chisel, Incans, dances in fire, Aborigines, star and spear. And so for me, the contrast seems to be more on like the first men did it this way. The ancient Egyptians did it that way. But it can teeter-totter. You can do first men, Egyptians, Incans, Aborigines, or stone walls, chisel, dances, star and spear. And you're still communicating that it's a story, but I feel the emphasis is more on the people telling the story, not how they told it. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Not with what.
Okay. I can see that. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Okay,
Yeah.
I could see that. I could see that. Yeah, how these are all the different kinds of peoples, and they tell the stories in different ways. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
cool with that. And does anybody else agree or disagree?
I agree.
I agree.
Yeah, I think
like
the
that
different,
idea.
the
Yes.
different groups of people are an important part of the story.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So
I make a
Then-
motion. We pass that resolution for Josh. 20 seconds.
I'm Joshua Alexander, and I approve this message.
Also, too, in that third line, should it not be the Incans told stories? Not
Yes.
story.
Thank you for pointing that out.
I changed that in my read, but it didn't make sense to say just story.
Yep.
No, the way the Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it, not them, with star and spear.
See, I saw the first men painted stories on stone walls, and I tried to carry that through.
Yeah,
think
because
you're
the
talking
Incans
about-
wouldn't tell one story.
Yeah,
I think
but
you're talking about
that's sort of
story
a-
in general.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I think that's sort of almost like a poetic reference to stories
Right.
altogether, told
Yep.
story. But
Exactly.
They
I
need new
would
writers.
say,
What?
New writers. Fire 'em.
yeah. I would actually tend more towards keeping with
The way it's written.
no, not the way it's written. Actually, I would advocate to, changing it to stories and told them. But that's just because I don't know. It kind of
Story in this case is a broad
rolls a little bit easier. It makes it a little bit easier to read. It kind of flows
Yeah,
a
I
little
know,
bit better.
but,
in my
but
opinion.
we're
the way
supposed
it's
to
written.
adapt to it.
I like the way it's written
Me
because
too.
story is kind of a broad term.
Yeah.
Okay,
told
okay.
stories.
Then we'll keep story. We'll keep
That's all debatable, but
It's
that
like a-
verb disagreement in the last sentence has to go.
Yeah, that's the one that tricked me.
It's absolutely right.
Exactly.
Wait, what? What is it?
The one that sent me into a meltdown.
Yes, that
Oh,
Take the temporal and
stories
them
make the fleeting and take them eternal?
Take and
make.
make.
No. Stories
No,
take
it's
the fleeting temporal and makes them make them eternal. Take
Oh,
the
oh.
fleeting
Should be
temporal.
made.
and
What do you
make
mean it's
them
not
eternal.
plural?
So for line 3, are we saying we can do it either way and it's acceptable? Or are we saying that it has to stay with story?
Do whatever you want.
I say stay with story because if we were in
Yeah.
a session, we couldn't just rewrite no matter how we felt about
Well,
the
we
script.
could always ask about it. There's the thing.
Okay.
That's the one thing that I've noticed that actually a lot of the clients that I've worked with who have had these issues with liked was me asking about the script. Like, okay, I see you have written here it says story and it. Do you really want that to be singular? Like, what am I missing something about that, or was
And-
that supposed to be plural? And they
and
love
Mike-
explaining it.
Sorry, and Michael's exactly right. When you go into a studio and you got 10 faces staring back at you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with questioning something like that on a script. Is that a typo or is that how you want it read? If for any other reason, it shows them that you're pre-reading, you're invested in the script, and you're not just coming in, okay, let's do this, give me my money, let's go home. You're actually you're being part of the whole creative process, and it fortifies you with the client at that point too. So it's always a good idea to pick out little things and ask a couple of questions.
However,
However,
if you read as is, and then they come back and they go, "Oh, you know what? We totally messed that up. We're gonna need you to come back in and reread this." Huh? Huh?
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, I understand
the
I understand the editorial side of it, and like really wanting to do it correctly, but like I never let myself get bogged down with the tense should be singular, or should be plural or past participles and all
well,
that.
if it's just like one little tiny thing that you pick up on, you mention it. I'm not saying you have to go through it all with a fine tooth comb or whatever.
Right.
But I mean, if it's just one little thing like that's something to me that's really stood out. Is I thought it should be stories, but I mean, if they know that's how we want it, okay, that's cool. Just thought I'd ask.
It's like using the word peoples instead of people. It is a more poetic way of saying it.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Xavier, were you going to say something?
Thanks. In terms of grammatical stuff, I was in a situation and I was doing some promos for a major network, and there were some things that I didn't catch and the producer didn't catch either. And it went to air, and we ended up being really embarrassed. So It's really all about teamwork. Catch whatever could be a mistake as early as possible. Don't try to let it slide to get another record. Really, just be a big boy and say this looks a little wonky. What about it?
Yeah,
I guess the other reason too about the whole story thing here, just to kind of put it to bed finally, is Incans is pluralized, dances is pluralized, but yet story is singular. Like the Incans told story with dances. So,
okay.
Did they have multiple dances for the same story?
Probably.
That's all I'm getting. Or did they tell only one story? It's like, okay, guys, we can only do one story and one dance. So let's make sure we get the exact right story we want to do this to, okay? Anyways, I'll shut up now.
I understand.
Yeah, I think the wording here is just for poetic prose. So let's just, I don't know.
I'm not a pro.
Yes, you are.
Prose.
Prose. Got it. I'll spell out all my words before I say them.
Make sure you have prose, singular or plural.
Well, how about this? Let's do it this way. Let's do it this way. When we go through our reads again, go ahead and read it like it is on the script. And if it still just really doesn't come off right, we'll switch it. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Cool. All right.
I'm just having fun.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to squash that fun. No fun here. No fun at all on the mic check.
No levity.
Get that fun out of here. So we're going back here. Let's focus on this last one here. Stories are at the essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. We have grammatical errors in there, right?
Lots of them.
Let's point them out. What are they? What should we change?
In the very last sentence only?
Oh.
Just take that S away from making them eternal.
How did I lose my script?
So stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal?
Yes.
That's it.
The rest of it can flow pretty easily.
The rest of it is prose.
Yeah.
Now that I'm sort of repeating this over and over again in my head, I can see why they wrote it the way they did.
So do I. They take it.
Yeah. Stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal.
It should be makes.
Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
He's talking about the fleeting temporal, not the stories. That's why it.
Yeah.
That's why it's pluralized there. Or
What is a fleeting temporal?
it's time.
I've been asking that question all night.
So
It's an idea. It's a quick idea. Fleeting.
Temporal means
Quick idea.
something that ends. It has a finite ending. The root word is temporary.
Got it.
So if someone has a thought about something, it's a fleeting thought, but it lives on because of stories.
I got it. Oh, that's okay.
I mean,
It's
I
either
said we
gonna
abandon the whole thing and just use Janet's. What's a fleeting temporal?
Yeah, can you imagine that?
Fleeting temporal,
They
whatever
count
the hell
breaths
that
of
is.
every sunlight, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. What's a fleeting temporal?
Yeah. Love it. Slam dunk.
Oh, man.
Stories take the fleeting temporal, whatever the hell that is.
You know what? With that delivery, I can imagine you with like a martini and a cigarette or something like that. You know, they take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal. You know, whatever fleeting temporal is.
Whatever the hell they're talking about.
But anyway, so let's get back into it. You probably heard me mention the ABC or 1, 2, 3 thing earlier when talking about this last sentence. It's a delivery style that gives a list a little bit more character. So if you have 3 things in a row, think of the ABC theme tone, you know, dun, dun, dun. That's sort of the delivery that you want to give. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. You see what I mean with that? Like the ABC, the 1, 2, 3, the, you know, low, high, mid.
BC.
Yeah, NBC, ABC, whatever. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I don't watch TV.
Yeah,
Actually, let's scrub that, please. Let's scrub that from the recording. I don't want people to know I don't. Anyway, So
we were going to hire him to do all of our network promos. No more.
Bye-bye.
But anyway, so the only reason I bring that up is because it can give the list here, this triple list here, a little bit of extra life, a little bit of extra storytelling. Otherwise, if you do it all the same, it sounds really flat. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Like the wording kind of breaks it up. The wording is engaging, but the delivery, it kind of falls flat.
You want me to do it? They count the breath of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Yeah, boring.
Definitely a Dan Reed. Definitely a Dan Reed. Another thing that I was taught while going through voiceover coaching is that if a word repeats, don't do anything with it. Like leave it alone. Don't emphasize it. Don't hit it. Just say it and be done with it. So they count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Well, I mean, if you didn't, this is what it would sound like. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart.
Okay.
You see how it's kind of odd? It's taking away from the important parts of what's actually being said. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. You see, if you sort of leave them alone, you basically what you do is you take the emphasis that you put on there, you split it in half, and you put it on the words to either side of it. You've got storytelling. That's simple. But yeah, when a word repeats, completely leave it alone. Don't even mark it. Don't cross it out. Don't nothing. It's just another word. You're trying to go for the story in each one of those points. Okay, so are there any questions, any other comments?
Breaths, beats, silence.
Right. Well, breaths, sunrise, beats, emotion, silence, heart.
Yeah,
But-
and I was
but
going to
you did
say,
decide to do that on story in the first line, even though it repeats itself.
No, just the first story, not both stories.
No?
Yeah, on the first line, you emphasize story and then matters in the second line.
Okay.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters.
Boy, we've
You know what I mean?
critiqued this so much, I'm scared to read. I'm like, okay, here we go.
Well, if you've marked it up, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. If you got some good mental notes going.
I knew I forgot something.
No, I do.
Apple pencil.
Was the end consensus to keep makes?
Sorry, go ahead.
Was the end consensus to keep it makes?
Yeah. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Are there any other questions about the script? Any markings or anything that maybe wasn't super clear that we didn't go over before we get back into it?
When you say stories are the very essence of human life, what was highlighted there?
Well, stories are at. First of all, we got to make sure to not skip over that. Stories are at the essence of human life.
The very essence.
I don't think that we really went over that sentence, actually. Thank you for asking. So my opinion are stories are at the very essence of human life. Very essence should be the pinnacle point of that sentence. And that sentence should be delivered with a little bit extra reverence and awe because it's sort of the pinnacle of the whole script. That's the main encompassing idea behind everything else that's going to happen afterwards. So I believe, unless somebody disagrees with me, which I'm always open to, very essence is the main point there, and that should be the actual crescendo of the crescendo, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The whole script is encapsulated in that line.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Right, Gary?
Stories are at the very essence of human life.
So, once again, just to give a brief overview, this is to be read somewhat quiet, very reverent, and a little bit slower. We're talking about we're establishing that stories are everywhere and they matter at the beginning, and in the end, and during that little body portion, the next two lines are all about who is telling the story. And then that culminates in stories are at the very essence of human life. Then we describe that with the sort of 1, 2, 3 ABC feel to it. You know, they count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. And then stories, and we'll keep the grammar as is right now. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
You say makes it eternal.
Yeah.
Well, again, much like story before it, in the second line, I think the fleeting temporal is kind of a poetic way of referencing all of them, like every single fleeting temporal anything. So I think it's another singular referring to plural.
You can't say story takes and then makes, because that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Right, but that's what you're saying, to keep it.
Yes.
Are you saying keep?
Yep, keep it just as is.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so now we have enough time, I think, for everybody to go ahead and have a couple of reads at this. Like I said, we're going to have a read, and then we're going to go ahead and open up the floor to anybody to critique any portion of it. It's going to be a completely open discussion. Everybody has a chance to give their input, except the person who's reading.
Okay.
When you are behind the microphone, here's our one golden rule that we will always stick to here. When you are behind the microphone, you are the performer. If something didn't sound right to you, that's not important. You are the performer. You are performing. We will be the directors. Okay?
Aww. Fine.
Sorry, Dan.
I'm the reason that rule was made, by the way.
All right. Well, Josh, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Oh, me first. Okay.
Yeah, we're going back in the same order. So try to remember who went before you. And if not, I think Dan does have a list.
Well, nobody went before me last time.
Yeah.
So I'll remember I picked Frank again, and I'll say his name correctly this time. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told stories with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
All right.
Well, that last
opening it
part
up.
was really good.
What did everybody
last
think?
part.
Okay, so the last part was good. He ended off well. What about the rest of it? What did everybody think about the whole thing?
In the first two lines, you emphasized every. You hit every and every, and made those the two more important words of each sentence, unfortunately. And it should be story and matters should have the emphasis on them.
Okay. Did anybody else catch that? Because I did. Okay, so yeah, make sure that story and matters are the most important parts up there. Another thing I noticed is in the third line down, you changed story to stories. And again, we decided to keep that as singular because it's sort of that poetic way of referencing the plural.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Okay, well, we're establishing it now. We decided to keep it singular because it's sort of that poetic way to reference everything.
Mm-hmm.
But in the rest of it, I felt you did really, really well. Just make sure to pay attention to those two things. The first line is story and matters. And then in the third line, story remains singular. So go ahead and give us another read.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
All right. What did everybody think of that read?
You get golf claps.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, on the VO mic check, is the highest compliment you can get.
Yay!
Wait, I
Got
thought
a
we
little bit
established
of
that the highest
emphasis.
compliment that you could get was you're hired.
That's the
No, I meant on this. In the real world, yes.
Well, no, I felt that you took the direction very, very well. Your read was really solid. It really was engrossing. You hit all the story points really, really well. After that last adjustment, you did fantastic.
But I thought you guys, aren't you actually hiring me for this? Wait, this is a workout? Oh,
Right.
Sorry.
Good workout, babe.
no, thank you. Appreciate it. I really do.
Awesome. Well, hey, you did a fantastic job. All right. So next up was Dan.
No, me.
It
No,
was Frank,
Frank.
because I said his name wrong.
Frank.
Right.
I got him written down in the chat. I know, but
Beautiful.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Okay. What did everybody think of that read?
are we saying temporal or temporal?
Temporal.
Okay, because it's actually pronounced both ways, so I was just making sure.
Well, up here in Canada.
I don't know if we really want to go out there, we can call it the temporal. Was way overemphasized everything.
Next time, Frank, just kind of segue and lead into that last sentence and just give it a little bit more feeling. Felt like it dropped off a little bit just the very end there.
Oh, the stories take the fleeting temporal.
However you want to pronounce it.
Go
Yeah.
temporal.
Isn't that a
It
soup?
just didn't sound like you were summing up.
Okay.
And I
Anything
think
else?
I think the reference to or the mention of every in the second to the last sentence, the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, every sounded the same until the last one where he put some variation on the silence of every heart. I could be wrong, but that's what I heard.
Okay.
I heard slight variation, but not enough to be like super noticeable. So I can see. How
So more variation on the NBC.
No. I think you did the NBC fine. It's just that what he's saying is that you skipped over every in the first part or in the first part of the list and the second item of the list, but not in the third. You sort of
I
hit it
see.
a little bit more.
More variation.
Yeah. I did notice that. I didn't think it was super bad, but I mean, if you want to just, go ahead and keep a mental note to put all the emphasis on silence and heart. I mean, again, it wasn't too harsh in general, but I do agree with the fact that your feeling did sort of die before the end of the script.
Okay.
Here's another thing that I mentioned to a lot of people, and I will mention it to this group as well. Your finish line is long after the script ends, so you're acting even when you're not saying anything.
I've never
So
heard
just
that.
keep that in mind.
Keto.
Yeah, Dan obviously has never heard it before. Well, anyway, go ahead. Let's hear another read.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Okay. What did everybody think of that, Rita?
Joshua.
It was really nice. It was really nice. That's my way of saying it was really nice.
I might have noticed a tempo change. It might have been my connection.
I think it was pretty even throughout. So it might have been your connection. Did anybody else happen to notice a tempo change? The cadence of his read? Okay, yeah. So it might have been the connection. I thought the tempo was really solid all throughout. I mean, Frank, you're getting better and better like every single time at taking this direction, and it's fantastic because that was an amazing read. I really liked that read.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
What is it called? Golf?
Golf clap. Golf clap.
Golf clap. All right. So
who did I pick? I said it was Donna was next after me.
Hi, everyone. I'm here.
Welcome back.
No, I was here all along. It sounded great. Thank you. Are we ready?
Yes, we're ready. Go for it whenever you are.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incas told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are the very essence of human life. They count the breath of the sunrise, the beats of every motion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Okay. Opening it up. What did you all think of that read?
It was nice. She did. I always say punch. You guys know that. What is the word I'm looking for?
Emphasize.
Emphasize story both times in the first line, and she missed at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you skipped over at the very first sentence of the last line. Stories are at the very essence of human life.
I'm looking to where, I didn't, stories are, I missed at. Okay,
Yeah,
stories are the very, I said stories are the very.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, stories are at the very essence of human life. I think you also made breath singular. I think you might have missed the S. Did anybody else hear that? Or
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yes,
that way.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you also made breath singular. It's, they count the breaths of every sunrise. Everything else though was pretty good. One thing that I noticed though is you started and ended every sentence the exact same way. Did anybody else hear that?
I was trying to put my finger on it, but that's what it was, Michael. It was there was in the middle of sentences there was a change as far as inflection was concerned, but every beginning and end was sort of at a monotone kind of level.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was every moment had a story, and every story mattered. It was sort of this arc in pitch.
Melody.
Yeah, the first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. Something that could help is imagine your tone as like a line that you draw above every sentence, and yours was a series of arcs over each and every sentence. I'd love to hear more variation in that. So like the first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. So like make it almost like a sine wave. That could really help out with the storytelling here too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you go ahead and give us another read?
Okay. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on a stone wall. Can I start this over?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incas told stories with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
That was much more of a storytelling read there. Did everybody else notice that?
That was love. Yeah, Nathan said Donna reminds me of June Foray.
Who is that? Sorry.
June Foray.
It's June Foray. Come on, it's June Foray.
You know June Foray?
Yeah.
Is that a compliment?
Yeah, it's a compliment. It's a compliment.
Oh, thank you.
Once again, though, you did miss stories are at the very essence of human life.
Okay.
Now, why don't you just go ahead and take that last line? The stories for starting with stories are at. Just perform that last one to the end.
Okay. Stories are at the very essence of human life.
I will stop you right there. I'll stop you right there. I'm glad you hit the at hard, but let's go ahead and weave it into the rest of the read. It hit a little harder than you should have, I think. So just stories are at the very essence of human life. Go for it.
Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Very nice.
More.
Very
nice.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Donna, I don't know how old you are, and I don't want to guess, and I don't want you to say, but and I don't want to imply anything either, but it's like, I really felt like this, like grandma in a rocking chair reading a really sweet, soft story. The last time you did that, like really putting awesome emphasis on words and just making it super precious. Especially like the first time when he stopped you and he said stories are at the very essence. Yeah, you hit at hard, but the very essence of human life. You could hear you just really getting into it and communicating. It was great.
Thank you.
I think something she did well when she says like breaths, beats, and silence. They kind of sounded like those words. You know, breaths had like a breath to it, beat had a beat to it, and silence was quiet.
Yeah.
It's great that you picked up on that. It's very true.
Yeah. And by the way, June Foray was a very famous, she's passed since, but she was a very famous voice actress. She was the voice of Rocky the Squirrel from the Bullwinkle cartoon.
Oh, right. I know where she lived. Yeah.
And she was also the voice of Cindy Lou Who from The Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Oh.
Oh, that was a compliment for sure. Oh my gosh.
Oh, definitely.
Well, thank you. Wow.
Right. Once again, great job. Who was up next?
Janet was after.
I think I was. Yeah. Okay.
And then after Janet is Devin. Okay.
Okay. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Okay. What did everybody think of that, Rita?
I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love your voice, Janet. I really do.
I love you, Frank.
But I just wish.
But where did I screw up?
Well, it's not so much screw up. I just wish you could get a little more emotion in it, like that. Excuse me. That last paragraph. Every one of those lines, they count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. There was no like step up, step down, or anything like that. It was just all delivered exactly the same.
All right. Well, I'll knock it out this second read.
Yeah. And also, too, when you're going through like the Incans, the Incans told a story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Try and get a little more emotion in there if you can. You've got that wonderful smoky voice of yours that really lends itself to telling a story.
All right.
So,
yeah.
I'll try.
Also, the three different things, every was stressed, like Michael said not to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
every time.
Wait, what?
Every was stressed every single time in that last sentence. They
Oh,
count the breath of every
oh,
sunrise.
okay.
You also did it with story in the first 3 times it was said.
Right.
Every moment, the story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls.
Okay, right. Okay, you're right. Okay.
I caught that.
I forgot and just read it. Okay.
I know there was something else. I didn't mark it. So sorry.
Oh,
I heard the same arc, the similar arc as Donna, but whereas you have like if there's a scale from conversational here and then powerful over here, you're more over on this side, where the conversational side, if you can move it over and make it more connective, when you read those things, like I lost my script, sorry. Like you're talking to somebody, picture somebody right in front of you. The Incans told story with dances and fire. However you phrase it, however you intone it, but give it some more of like you're actually talking to someone is the impression I got.
okay. Okay. Oh, shit.
So many auditions request conversational, though. I mean, you see it all the time.
I know.
Guy next door.
All right. Oh, God. All right. Well, I'm going to try and give it emotion. No, I know, because I sound serious all the time. Okay. Well, I'll try it. I know I do. All right. All right. And don't do, let's see, every. Okay. Do moment and story. All right, here I go. I'll try it. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. Sorry. I swear, I don't mean to swear. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise. Oops. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. Sorry, I don't know what that was.
Let's see. So like in the past, you skipped at stories are at the very essence of human life.
Come on.
So you said stories are the very essence of human life. And while that can be argued to be totally true and totally fitting with the script, I mean, let's try to stick to the wording. Stories are at the very essence of human life. I also noticed that your tone arcs were the same throughout. Again, so the Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. You did that both times. You did that on both of those, and you see that it's the same arc for both of those sentences, and it makes you feel.
And it shouldn't be, right?
No, because it makes it feel really disconnected.
Okay.
I think the most important piece of direction I would give is make this personal. Make this more important to you. Okay. Pretend like it's something that you find really special to yourself and present it that way. This is supposed to seem like a really sensitive, in-depth look at something that's really, really important to you. Okay. So that would, I think, be the biggest direction I could give for this next read, is just make it important to you.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any other input that they'd like to give?
That actually summed up what I was going to say, so I'm not.
All right. Okay, I'll try. Here we go. I'm scared.
Don't be scared. You're fine.
Not that I'm scared. I'm just like, you're going to go, doesn't she comprehend? All right, hold on.
We already know you don't, so it's not like
all right. Jesus.
We love you, Janet.
I know. Listen, I work. I get work, So it's not like I don't get work. And this would be one I'd get a thumbs up on, but apparently not. Apparently not. All right. I'm sorry. Here we go. All right, here we go. I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm going to talk to somebody. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told stories with... Oh man, it's the vertigo. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Generally, much better. Although, with that last list, you hit every.
I really, that's just sucks. You know what I mean? That's a bummer.
So how about this? Just take that last line and just move the, remember, you're cutting the emphasis in half and moving it from every to what's on the left and what's on the right of the word. So the first one, count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart.
Okay. I hope I understood. Okay. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion.
You're doing it again. You're doing it again. You're hitting every.
What's my problem?
Yeah,
Sorry,
well,
guys.
it's because every is one of those words that has to have a lot of power to it, and it's kind of a natural thing for your mind to hit that. We've heard a lot of really, well, I would say, I mean, technically it's bad voiceover, but it sells. We've heard a lot of bad voiceover in the past that always hits those descriptors. You know, come and check out all our inventory. You know.
Right.
You can get this and this. So we naturally associate, you know, when we have to put emphasis on something with those really, really salesy things that really hit us hard all the time. So this is an exercise in trying to get away from that. This is an exercise in understanding that the story takes precedence over the sale. There's no sale here. And when you hit things like every, all, and, or, you know, things like that, you're moving into the sales territory. Right. So what you definitely want to do is remember that the stories that you're trying to tell here, the story in this last list, is they count the breaths of every sunrise. Every is just a link between the two emphases: the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart.
Okay.
So it's really, this is going to take a lot of concentration, because you're going to have to focus on you know, where the story's being told and not where your muscle memory is trying to take you.
Right. Okay.
So let's give that a try. From stories are at the very essence of human life to the end.
Okay.
Go for it.
Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Okay. You hit the second every.
The second.
Yeah, you really hit the second one. It'd be good to actually act this out with your hand. So you like point every time you want to do an emphasis.
Oh, right. Okay.
The breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion. So give that a try.
Or could you do this too? Like, I'm sorry, I've had to blow his wrist. The breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, silence of every heart. Something like that too, maybe?
I didn't see you.
Oh, really? Did the breath?
Yeah, you actually turned your camera off.
Oh, sorry. I have to switch back and forth I have just a lowly iPad. So you go, the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every heart, you know, I can't remember.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. You could, however you want to do it, just make sure that there's an action to indicate what the things that need the emphasis really are. Go ahead.
Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah, that was much better.
Okay.
There's a reason we're called.
I know what
There's
you
a reason
mean.
we're called voice actors, because we're supposed to be acting this whole time. Like, come on, you're asked to take something like I don't know, a Home Depot commercial and make it sound conversational. When have you ever had like a decent conversation with somebody about Home Depot?
I know.
You know, you only
Yeah.
go to Home Depot because you forgot something the last time you went to Home Depot. Like,
Dan. Why does it say Dan?
I don't
Nathan.
know.
Wait, what? Oh, you know what? I have vertigo. Oh no.
All right. Well,
Nathan, why are you under Dan?
he's doing some trickery back over
Oh,
there.
wait a minute.
But
Is it
anyway,
your-
in the interest of time, let's go
Never
ahead and
mind,
move
I'm
on,
sorry.
shall we?
Sorry, guys.
Next
Okay,
was Devin, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Devin.
All right. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal.
Okay. What did everybody think of that, Reed?
She cheated.
She cheated? What do you mean?
Huh?
Said make them eternal. We agreed we were going to say makes them eternal.
That was my subconscious making this way.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Makes.
I noticed she emphasized chose after Egyptians.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So emphasize chisel more.
No, emphasize Egyptians a little bit more. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead.
Okay.
Yeah, because the direction was we're talking about the different peoples throughout history. Something that I noticed is your emotional state. It sounded more like a horror script at the very beginning.
That's what I was.
Suspense. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. I'm sorry. It may not have been. I know it was not your intention, but unfortunately, in that register of your voice, that's how it came off.
Okay.
So I mean, that'd be good to know for a Halloween script. I just don't think it would fit with this one.
Okay.
Fairly monotone. That's what I got.
Yeah, it was fairly monotone throughout the whole thing too.
A little bit of deviation here and there. I mean,
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
and that first line sounded like a horror movie. Oh wait, no. I'm kidding.
Why don't you go ahead and give us another read?
All right. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
It makes them internal. Got it.
Eternal.
What did everybody think of that, Reed? What were some impressions on it?
I heard some upspeak on dances and fire, where it almost sounded like a question a little bit.
Okay. Did anybody else get that?
I got it on chisel instead. I didn't catch that.
Okay.
And I think the every was kind of hit with the three things too a little bit.
I don't think it was hit too badly. I mean, I get what you mean. I did hear that a little bit, but to me at least, it didn't really come off as harsh as would need like some major correction.
The surrounding words were punched a little bit harder, emphasized a bit more than the every, but the every did have a little bit of emphasis, so it kind of blended in with the rest of it to me. So I didn't have a comment on it at all because I thought it sounded good.
My bad.
You breaking your iPad?
No, I dropped my axe.
Ah.
By the way, I'm being serious.
The horror story again.
Anyway, why don't you give us one more read?
All right. All right. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. The Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
All right. What do everybody think about that read?
Figured out what it is.
What is it?
Devin, you're enunciating a little too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've gone through this before. You do have a tendency to just make sure that every word is understood.
Okay.
Where you muddy it up a little, make it sound a little bit more comfortable, maybe.
Yeah, I think matters sounded like matters. That was one
Yeah.
word I caught that on that too.
Okay.
Devin, let me ask you something. I'm going to take a page from Michael's book. How did you feel when you read that?
It just didn't feel good at all. Just felt like I was like, well, first of all, I feel like I have some congestion in my chest, so a little bit of that, but also just, I don't know, I'm not connected to it, tired, I don't know, like I have no energy.
Well, when you were asked to read again, you said, all right, a little reluctantly, and then you went through it. And that kind of showed that your heart wasn't in it. I've heard you do excellent reads before, but I just think you were very self-conscious that time.
Yeah. I am more self-conscious on the quieter ones because I have more of a, I guess, quirky voice. And so then it comes out like horror when I try to do something a little more serious. So trying to find that sweet zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, then try a zone 2 read.
Yeah. Sure.
Why not?
All right. Let's see how it works. Every story. Okay. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
I really liked that read.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really liked that read.
Very, very connected read.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Totally different tone, like direction of it, but way more positive and way more like you believed in what you were saying. They say live the script, and like you were living it rather than reading it, which is what the last one sounded like.
Thank you.
So much like how I seem to sort of gravitate towards zone 1 reads, it seems like your tendency is towards zone 2 reads.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll use that in the future. I'll remember that.
Next.
Good job. Yeah. Who goes up next?
That would be me.
Yeah.
That'd be Dan.
That would be Dan. I'm gonna do a Dan read first.
Or we'll get it out of your system. Go for it.
Yeah. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first man painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Now that that's out of your system, let's hear a good one.
Okay. I had to do at least one.
Which, if you decode, you know what he was saying about the last one.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
So one thing that I noticed is you had a really good wave to your tone, except I felt it was reversed, if that makes any sense. I felt that you ended off on down notes on the first half and then up sweeps on the second, and it didn't really feel quite right. It didn't have that storytelling feel to it. For example, the first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose chisel instead.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When I think to give it that more sort of reverent gravitas feel, it should be the opposite. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? Am I?
Oh,
off?
I got you. I actually know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. Did anybody else get anything else? Like, did anybody else notice anything? Am I just talking? Okay. Well, Dan, go for it.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal. I just sounded more poetic when I said temporal instead of temporal. Sorry.
All right. Well, what did everybody think of that read?
I'm getting a kind of like I'm spaced out vibe from it.
Okay. Disconnected.
So
okay.
Relaxed.
Anybody else? Does anybody else agree with that feeling?
Yeah.
Very
It's a
laid
pretty good
back.
assessment. And I think that similar to Janet's arc, or I think it was Donna's arc. Is that right? I think it was Donna's arc. A similar arc, like cannon fire shooting off, but the same arc. That was probably a poor comparison, but analogy. The same kind of arc that sounded.
Really want to.
What's that?
I can speak in cannon fire if you really want me to.
We shall see.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I actually do know what you're trying to say. You're saying that my the first three lines, they all had the same waveform.
Yeah, every moment has a story, and every story matters. First men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. It was just the same intonation all the way through. It felt like.
Okay. All right.
It's the sound of silence.
Of the heart, of every heart. Oh.
Hello, grid of 9 people, my old friends.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters.
Thought you were going Brady Bunch on us there for a minute.
Yeah, I caught myself for a second. There's that story. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
It's just too soft.
It's just me.
Well, no, it's just too
No.
soft. Like to me, at least, it's.
Well, we were supposed to read it in the microphone soft, right? Weren't we supposed to read it?
But I mean, also, what works best for you? Just like with Devin, how Zone 2 worked better than Zone 1. I mean, some people just don't do Zone 1 as well as Zone 2 or something like that. So try reading it again, but try reading it maybe in a Zone 2. Like just try backing off and talk it a little louder, because it's just too soft somehow. There doesn't seem to be enough emotion, enough change of inflection anywhere in there. Like you're telling a story. It still sounds like you're just reading it.
Oh, I got you. Okay, I understand what you're saying.
You know, there's no story, no emphasis, no nothing going on. It's just like, I got words in front of me and I'm going to read them now. And this is what we're going to do.
Okay. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Yeah, and also too, your every sentence is ending the exact same way.
Yeah, I did that. I actually did catch myself doing that and just.
Yeah, because the first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. Dances and fire, star and spear, human life. It's like there's like this little all of a sudden jump up in your voice at the very end for some reason.
Speak.
And you know, we're not all made to read certain reads. I mean, we have niches. You know, I do documentaries, I do old ladies, and I do
I actually
villains.
like this kind of read, and that's
You do like this kind. Okay, then work. Okay, then do it. Okay. All right. I was.
No, I mean, I liked it. It doesn't necessarily mean I can do it.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to offer some
No, I know, Frank. You're
yeah,
right.
and I'm not trying to be mean or anything.
No, I'm just being silly.
You know,
I worry for everybody else. You know.
What I think it is it doesn't feel like you have any kind of personal connection with this. Meaning you're not channeling any sort of like something that's really important and special to you. You know how you would generally discuss that with somebody. It seems like it's really difficult for you to channel that with this read specifically. It feels like you're attempting to be calm and passive. What I caught at the very end of this last read, it was much better than your reads before. But what I think it's missing is that personal connection that you have towards something really special. Like think of something that's incredibly special to you, something that is things that is a thing that you would talk about in a reverent kind of tone, something that's like
so everywhere you see the word story, substitute the word beer. Substitute the word beer.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Maybe add smile to it. I guess I really wasn't.
Every
smiling.
moment has a beer, and
every beer matters.
Yeah, wait a minute.
The first men painted beers on stone walls.
Dan, maybe you can try smiling. Maybe put a smile on your face. It might change your emotions.
The Incans told beer with dances and fire.
Beer are at the essence of human life.
Very.
Dan, trust me, for you, buddy, it works. It really does. I just know how much you enjoy a good beer from time to time.
Yeah, so the thing that I'm really getting at here is take something that is incredibly like personally special and important to you, and channel how you feel about that thing into how you're referring to these stories. That would be, I think, again, that would be the one big thing I would say about this. I think it could solve a lot of your problems.
Go with beer.
Is there time to let him read it with a smile on his face all the way through? Is there
No, that's
time?
So I'm gonna try it.
Are you
Well,
tired?
we're cutting it. We're cutting it really,
All right,
really
okay,
close. But
okay,
all right, we can move on.
I'm gonna
All
speed
right.
through it.
Love you, Nate. Dan. Okay. Whatever.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Okay.
I thought that was, yeah, that was really
Better.
solid.
Much better.
Definitely. All right, moving on. Who's next?
I picked John. That's right.
John, you're up.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Wow. Oh, I'm very impressed. It was a really, really, really solid read right off the bat there.
I have nothing, absolutely nothing to say about it.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to mention about his read?
Other than it deserves the biggest golf clap of the night. That's a hole-in-one mic drop kind of read.
That
right
really is. I really don't have anything I could say about that read. You felt connected to it. It felt really storytelling. It was like the emphases were in places that they needed to be. It felt natural. Like that read felt like it was your own personal experience. It was a solid read altogether. That was fantastic.
Thank you. To be fair, I did it before. A couple years ago.
That's fine. That's fine.
And said thank you, and she had a great time, and she'll probably be back.
Awesome.
Oh, all right,
I'm
Kristen.
the same. I've got to grab some dinner and then go to an appointment, so I'm really sorry. But this is really great, and I'll be back for the next one.
Hey, you're always welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Sorry, I have to leave.
No
Great job,
worries.
everybody.
No
Great
worries.
job in
Take it
advance,
easy.
Gary, and everybody else who hasn't read yet. Golf clap for you in advance.
Does anybody remember who was after Crystal?
It's in the chat.
Michael.
In the chat.
Oh, it's
Michael.
Michael. Okay. All right.
She likes his name.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Yeah, great job.
Really good. Yeah.
Another golf
Yeah.
clap.
Yeah. Other.
Okay,
Don't
then.
know what I would say to criticize that.
Hit on
Nothing.
everything. Yeah.
Nothing.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Moving on. Who's next?
Xavier.
Who did I choose? Oh, Xavier.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
My favorite question in the industry. Okay. Since I, on audition form, I'm going to slate my name. I hope there are no objections to that.
Go for it.
Xavier Paul. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and make them eternal.
Okay. The only thing that I noticed was just that you turned make at the very end or you turned makes at the very end singular. But other than that, I thought it was a really solid read altogether. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to mention about the read?
Good job adding color to the words. It's almost like a little bit of visual to the way the description of the words star and spear and things like that. It's good job.
So I would just ask for you to take the last sentence, just the very last bit, and just make sure to keep makes plural. That would be it.
Oh, I can't just read one line. I'll have to do the whole thing.
Well, I mean, if you want to, go for it.
Yeah, I'm going to just go ahead and hog the mic for my entire whole bit. I'll just take a complete. Here we go, on take 2.
That was funny. That was funny.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dance and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
All right. In the third line, you changed dances to singular again. So you said Incans told story with dance and fire. And while that is very theatrical, I actually wouldn't, I would probably, if I was directing this session, I'd be like, yeah, you know what, let's change it. That sounds great. Yeah, you know what, actually, let's change it. That sounds great. Forget it. You sounded good.
Okay.
Yeah, you accidentally said dance and fire. And honestly, I don't think that there's going to be too much of an uproar against that, to be honest, unless anybody wants to retake it from that point. I think it was a really solid read.
Yeah.
We'll just cut the first take in too.
Yeah.
What microphone is he using?
Oh, no, I can't kiss and tell. As you must keep certain things secret. You can't have a chef giving away his prime spices.
Gary.
I will say it's not a Neumann U87, that overrated microphone.
Well, still.
What's the difference?
Or a Sennheiser 416, which is, I'm sorry, I hate that thing.
So you're not going to tell us?
Oh, all right. Although I will preface it by saying I think my sound has more to do with the sound treatment and, what the good Lord gave me in all candor.
Simple question. What kind of mic are you using?
It is, yeah, I'm getting to it. It's the C1 Studio Projects.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, then. We're running really close on time here. Who's next?
Gary.
I'm next.
Gary.
Alrighty.
Let's hear it.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
Nice read.
Yeah, one of the things that I really love about your read here, about this delivery specifically, is that it had a really great mix of both informative and connected. It seemed like you could easily get both of those from that same read. And I love that about your read. That was a fantastic read.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, another golf clap, another one-off. Honestly, I don't really have anything to say. That was really really solid read altogether. Like you felt like you had some connection to the script and you delivered it that way. Good job.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. All right, who's up next? It was Russ, right?
Sure.
It would be Russ. All right, Russ.
Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told a story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
All right. Anybody have any input for Russ?
Added words. He said the Incans told a story with dances and fire. There was one other place he added a word to. I just can't place it.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only one that I noticed as well. Told a story with dances and fire. All in all, though, I think the emotional space was really good. It was really right on top of what we were talking about, and in general, it was a really solid read. Go ahead and give us one more take. Just be really careful about adding a before story right there in the third line.
All right. Every moment has a story, and every story matters. The first men painted stories on stone walls. The ancient Egyptians chose the chisel instead. The Incans told story with dances and fire. Aborigines told it with star and spear. Stories are at the very essence of human life. They count the breaths of every sunrise, the beats of every emotion, and the silence of every heart. Stories take the fleeting temporal and makes them eternal.
You have children, Russ?
Yes.
Do you read to them a lot?
Not anymore. They're all grown.
Okay. Well, you used to, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I got a lot of that, and I think it sounded really, really good. Because it felt like that sort of like intimate, close, personal connection to the script and to the read itself.
Cool.
All of the delivery I feel was really good. You kept all of, like, specifically all of what we were talking about in mind, and I feel it sounded really great. Did anybody else notice anything about his read? Maybe anything that you caught that I didn't?
I noticed a slight difference between the two at the very end. Anybody else pick up on it? Very last word.
Oh, the eternal word?
Yeah. It seemed like the first read ended a little bit abruptly, like it was almost felt like it was cut off. Whereas the second read, like Michael had said earlier, the read ends after the last sentence or what have you. And that was the feeling I got the second time. So you really followed through real well at the end.
So like dragging out eternal, like eternal.
Yeah, it just conveys that you're summing it up.
But you're not quite done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and it sounded great.
Yeah.
Thanks. If I could just learn to go through the script and do what you do to it first, Mike, I would be so much better off. Because once I've got the direction, I'm good.
That's the important part, no doubt.
Yeah, it's that's still a skill that I'm doing, and it's much easier to do when I'm helping other people do it, apparently. But
I do the same thing. I have the same thing.
But I think all in all, again, you stuck to the direction real well, and you delivered it all very well, and it felt like you had a personal connection with it, which helped the story along. So I believe if that's it, since unfortunately we had some people drop out. Nathan, unfortunately, he's struggling with his voice right now. So yeah, he does need to read. We'll have him read first.
Pantomime for us a little bit, Nathan.
Yeah, pretend like you're reading. There you go. Turn on your video and pretend like you're reading.
There you go.
Oh, it's killing him too. You know that? It's absolutely killing him that he can't do this.
Well, anyway, I think this is a good time to go ahead and end. We're going to end the recorded portion of the mic check, but that doesn't mean that the meeting is over. So if you want to stick around and hang out for a bit, you're more than welcome to. Other than that, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. And if maybe there was any direction that I missed or something that you noticed throughout, throughout the reads, please let us know in the comments below. Well, we'd love to have a conversation with you about that. All right. See you all next week.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Join us every Monday for free script practice. You can also find the Mic Check on Facebook and Twitter. If you liked what you saw, then subscribe for more.